Welcome to Previously on X-Men,
the podcast that looks back on X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. And you can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Other shows on the network include Three Nice Things, where we force ourselves to say three nice things about a movie with a bad and often earned reputation. Radio 64, Video Game Music Remix Radio, and 9021, Here We Go, a 90210 rewatch podcast.
I like how, all across the board these shows are.
Yeah,
we got our hardcore geek podcast. We got the music. We've got movies,
mm-hmm.
and then
the X-Men podcast.
Got him. We're the geek one, Eric.
Oh no, what?
Yeah. We're geeky. They're nerdy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes.
Listen, I've seen what Steve looks like in that show. We're cooler than him.
That's true. And he was the cool one, so.
So crazy. But you know what? You can share your thoughts on this in upcoming episodes by following us on Facebook and Twitter at Previously on X. You know what? J.M. DeMatteis was right. The letter X is super cool.
It's cool. I mean, people got to be flipping through Twitter or whatever it is you do, and being like, previously on X, huh?
X.
There's something about that X that just makes me want to look at it.
Yeah. Please rate, subscribe, and share this show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. I'm Eric Mickles, known online as Dusk vs. Tweak. With me is my co-host,
Hilary Gunning. Hey.
Today we're talking about the 90s animated series with the Season 1 finale. The final decision.
We have made it.
Yes, the final decision is episode 13, last episode of Season 1, and then we'll also talk about Season 1.
As a whole. You want to know something funny?
Yes.
It's not funny. It might be vaguely interesting. I watched this episode on the DVD that I have, and it's called Volume 1, whatever, but it's like the whole first season, plus and then 3 more episodes.
Yeah, they fit 16 episodes on that disc. Yeah, that's the DVDs were released in 5 sets. 5 volumes, but they were not put out like seasons. I think it's mainly because the first season is 13 episodes, but then I think it was then ordered to be 39 more episodes after that. So it seems like with animated shows, when you break them up into seasons, it's kind of like what's your beginning and end kind of. And there's no new characters in this episode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it serves pretty strongly as a finale because it just wraps up. I mean, it wraps up the previous episodes because we have for the Previously on X-Men, we have basically just the Days of Future Past stuff.
Yeah. Which
is kind of interesting, actually, because it delves into stuff that goes way back further in the season.
Previously on X-Men.
Yeah, but we commented on Days of Future Past episodes that their Previously on X-Men moments were basically every episode from episode 1 until that. It was just the whole season 1. Whereas this last episode, it's Previously on X-Men recap, is just the Days of Future Past episodes.
I wonder why they did that. Because in the Days of Future Past one, it was clear why they had decided on the scenes that they chose for the Previously, because it was a thematic thing. But in this one, it's basically just stuff that happened in Days of Future Past. And it wasn't particularly related.
I wonder if it's just
they
considered this almost like part 3. Of Days of Future Past.
Yeah, seems like it would have to be.
I mean, we talked about it when we did the Days of Future Past Part 1 and 2, that 2 ends on such a cliffhanger that it feels like this one kind of is
Yeah, that's true.
That one. So maybe it's just hey, did you miss it last week? We'll catch up.
Here we go.
Yeah. Speaking of that, this episode aired March 27th, 1993, and was written by Mark Edens.
Okay.
So it wasn't one of those cases where they had to wait a whole bunch.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. Airing orders are always nuts.
And so I was wondering why he was chosen to do the last one. In the book, Previously on X-Men by Eric Lewald, the showrunner of the show, he said that Mark and him had laid out the 13-episode arc together. So he felt that Mark was the best choice to do the last episode, to write the last episode.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's very clear, that they have the whole season arc laid out. I mean, everything, even just little things, just pay off throughout the entire season.
Yeah, apparently they hadn't really planned out Magneto joining them during this episode.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's such a great... That's one of the best arc completers that there is.
All right, so the episode opens, it's riots. I wish the show could be relevant. I wish that we could take this show from the 90s and just somehow feel like it relates to us today.
Yeah, it's hard how isolated it is and how not expanded.
That's the problem with time capsules. They're just they're all
what are you
that
gonna
time.
Do?
No,
that was some sarcasm for everyone.
Sarcasm ends. It started and I was just like, boy, what a great amount of escapism this is right now.
Yeah. Well, no, but listen, like I had a similar experience, but like kind of the opposite, because I've spent the last 2 or 3 days just in a mire of depression about all the things that are happening with race in America right now. So when I watched this episode this morning, it was kind of like at the beginning is rough because you have the anti-mutant riot and everything. But as you go through it, just having this attitude of like inclusivity and fighting for what's right and like all this stuff was actually very cathartic for me.
No, I agree. It was just like I've been watching Community to just kind of like to escape lately, and then I put this on and it just opens to a bunch of bigots rioting, and then the whole conversations are like, if we don't stop this, it's going to erupt into a civil war. And I'm like, stop doing this show. But it just shows you that the core concept of the X-Men, it was just so well done by like Stan Lee and then the writers who came after in cementing like the civil rights movement and dealing with issues with minorities. Even though the comic had been created in the early 60s, it's still in 2020. 80 years later, it's still like 80 years later, and this is a almost 30-year-old show now, and so like it doesn't matter. It's always
it was relevant in the 60s. It was relevant in the 90s. It's relevant now.
It just shows you too how much this show understood that like this children's cartoon from 1993 that was on in between the Tick and the Power Rangers, you know what I mean? Is dealing with this, and like if you grew up as a kid watching this, then maybe you're watching the news today and you're not so surprised. It's familiar because the show.
Well, that's true. That's a really good point. Yeah, it like lays this psychological groundwork where you can kind of tack what's going on in situations in your adulthood to things that you saw characters you love dealing with. So, but the riots are happening because at the end of the previous episode,
there was an assassination
Kelly,
attempt, and Kelly was kidnapped by Magneto.
Right.
Magneto's back.
Why did you bring me here? What do you want? Your life.
Now Magneto's back, which was that great reveal at the end of the previous episode where Xavier says that they have a problem because his watch has been magnetized.
Yeah.
No, he just says his watch has stopped.
Yeah, and it's been magnetized. But yeah, Magneto's back. This is his first time back since we last saw him during the Deadly Reunions episode in the chemical plant.
Yes, they do the thing that I wish the movies would do.
Yes. I mean, gosh, 13, what was that? That was episode 4. That's been 9 episodes.
Isn't that the 3rd episode that Magneto's in?
He's in, yes, he is. That's when he shows up in Enter Magneto. But
but we haven't seen him since. Gotcha.
He was in Deadly Reunions, the Sabretooth Magneto combo kind of thing. So yeah, 9 episodes without the X-Men's like primary arch nemesis. While in Deadly Reunions and Enter Magneto, he was being a villain and he was like fighting them with the missiles and in the chemical plant. Here, he's really being set up for how he's going to be in the rest of the show, in that he's more of an anti-hero, he's more of an adversary than like their nemesis.
Yeah.
I guess. He's a roadblock, but he's not out there like trying to defeat the X-Men. He's not like Shredder every week being like, how will I stop the Turtles today? That was a terrible Shredder. I think I was going more Krang with that, actually.
I thought it was great. I loved it.
First season, we've had 2 villains up, and here he is in like this anti-hero. He's a bad guy with good intentions kind of setup.
Yeah. Well, you just get it so that they're on like incompatible paths.
Yeah.
He's not trying to hurt them, but what he does is...
because he's talking to Kelly. He says, like you, I agree.
Oh, that's such a good moment.
And normal humans can't live together.
I mean, okay, so what happens is Kelly is kidnapped. Magneto takes him to this barge thing in the middle of the ocean. Where
I wonder if the barge is a reference to those the 3 issues that Chris Claremont and Jim Lee did for the new X-Men volume in the 90s. Because X-Men and Magneto have like a big fight on a ship that's a ship that Magneto had sunk back in his earlier arch nemesis days. And I was like, oh, I wonder if this is a little reference. But anyways, continue. They're on the barge.
Yeah, so they're on the barge, and that's when Magneto has that moment where he says, like, listen, Kelly, you and I are on the same page here. We cannot coexist.
Right.
And I feel like that must be the very first time when Kelly is confronted with that this is like the fulfillment of his policy.
Of his fear. Yeah, of his policy, of his greatest fear, but also, like, this is what he's, like, created. He's built this road that it had to be.
So then
he's created the bottleneck for himself.
Exactly. Yeah. And so then it's just him and Magneto basically
he's
straight up
crush
is gonna murder him. Like,
he's
like
not
Kelly's
even gonna,
like, what are we gonna do? And he's like, well, I'm going to kill you. And he hovers whatever, like a motor or something.
A giant motor. He's not going to just kill Kelly. He's going to crush him.
He's just going to crush him.
Yeah. I like the line where he says, he's talking about, like, he's like, please, I have family. He's like, I've seen all my family executed, and I swore no more. And then he has that brief moment, like, but sacrifices must be made. It's just, it's so classic Magneto.
Well, like, you think that he's like, when he starts that statement, it feels like he's going to say, like, I've seen all of this death, and so I must avenge them, or I must do something to prevent it, or anything. But it's not really what he's saying. He's just saying, like, yeah, you're right, that sucks. My family has been killed. Your family's going to be sad that you're killed, but just gonna do it anyway.
It's such classic Magneto, where he's also kind of presenting himself as this noble defender and liberator, and then he's like, but also I'm going to crush you to death. and at the same time, he still feels like crushing this man to death is also the heroic thing to do. It's just, that's how Magneto is, that he kind of sees himself as the martyr. He's like, I'll get blood on my hands because I can do it, and it has to be done.
Yeah.
But also weep for me for my hands are stained. It's like, well, Magneto.
And it's also because what he's doing is, he says he's completing what other people started.
Yeah.
So he is acknowledging that he wasn't the one who planned to assassinate Kelly, but they failed. So he's like, I guess I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because Apocalypse is the one we found out who sent Mystique to kill Kelly. And Magneto was going to see that happen. But he wasn't him, so he must have just known.
Yeah.
I don't know how he knew. Maybe Mystique was like,
he's got his ear to the ground, Eric.
Yeah, that's probably true. But then the Sentinels show up, and it's Magneto versus the Sentinels.
I love how the Sentinel just reaches in and grabs the thing that was gonna crush Kelly. Like, he just knew exactly where it was and what was happening, and he's like, shakoom, and he grabs it.
I love when Magneto uses his power and the Sentinel is just like, this unit's been made out of plastics. Your magnetic powers won't work. And it's just like, boy, this Sentinel has been programmed for snark.
That's true. But then they think they're winning because they're all plastic.
Yeah.
And Magneto's like, this whole ship is my weapon.
I know, yeah. It's kind of amazing that he loses in that case.
It's true, yeah. I guess they just sent so many. I mean, there's a whole
he's outnumbered.
bunch.
Even him by himself,
Right away, they take Kelly, they run away, but then the few of them stay to kind of like take down Magneto. And then you don't really know what happened because we cut away to
because the X-Men are out. They know where Magneto is. Xavier had used Cerebro to locate him and Senator Kelly, and they get there, and they just see a bunch of destruction. Kelly's gone. There's like a broken Sentinel arm with a spike through it. That's pretty cool.
I love the line there because Gambit comes across it first, and he's like, Sentinel!
Yeah.
And then Wolverine, he says, takes a whole Sentinel to scare most people.
Yeah. Yeah, Wolverine and Gambit are definitely, I don't know, they're a duo in this episode.
Yeah, they're like buddy cops.
Yeah,
throughout this whole episode.
So I guess
you got like the snarking at each other, and you got like the grudging respect and everything.
But it's also a case where they're both like the bad cop.
Yeah, it's true. So, yeah, neither of them is like the golden boy.
Yeah, I don't know who the straight man is in that. It seems like Gambit would be the straight man.
I think he would in this.
Because Wolverine has his berserker rage, and Gambit's like,
he's just like off the rails.
Yeah.
They have a really cool shot when they first enter. They're all like creeping into the ship, and there's a shot where it's like the camera is looking at the water, like a puddle, and then you see Wolverine do like a flip into the shot, and you like watch it in the puddle, and then he lands in the puddle. It's very cool.
Right after this, I watched some of the Batman animated series, which was also very Fox Kids of me.
Yes.
And I don't think there was any show on at the time that was competing with Batman, the animated series, animation quality. X-Men and Spider-Man and all those other shows, none of them could like hold a candle to some of the Batman shows, like best episodes. But like,
well, yeah, I mean the style of
and I was like thinking that, but then that shot of like him doing that flip, and there's some other like really well animated stuff in this. I think I've always kind of thought of this show as a little poorly animated when it comes to his action scenes, but this time I've been really impressed with some of the stuff. Like the Wolverine Sabretooth fights are a little bit more fluid than I remember them. And then this episode has a lot of like really interesting elements. But yeah, that reflection in the water is very like cinematic
to me. But I remember us talking in previous episodes about specific things like that, just like really creative animation choices along those lines.
They find Magneto under a bunch of metal, and holy cow, I don't understand this. He's covered in blood.
He's covered in blood.
His torso is covered in blood. And I don't know how that got through censors, because like when you listen to the creators of the Batman animated series, they were never able to like get blood in when they were on Fox Kids, and they were always having to like come up with tricks like, okay, we want to have Batman play dice undercover, so we're going to put a bunch of other more intense things that the censors will cut instead. Like, it's all these tricks, and yet here is Magneto under rubble. I mean, I guess it's because he's...
I'm wondering, because I know that for some shows, like particularly animes, when they would play them like during the day and stuff, they would actually physically remove blood and things from the animation.
I don't know.
But then, like, the original, and, like, when they'd air it at night or something, it would have it all in there. I wonder if they did something like that in the original era.
I mean, maybe they just didn't pick up on it. Maybe they just
could
thought
be.
it was
I mean, it could have just been, like, oil or
but
dirt.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, there he is, just bloody. Master Mold is back.
I am giving the orders now.
Master Mold is back.
Yeah, he's a silly design. I don't know how most people feel about Master Mold, but every time I see him, I'm like, you're silly.
Master Mold is in charge.
Okay, so Master Mold, they've rescued Senator Kelly. Kelly's gonna, when he becomes president, he's going to allow Sentinels to be in charge of the mutants.
That's like the reason that Trask had them rescue him.
And so he's like, I'm going to get you that order. It's going to happen. And he's like, all right, bring him back. And the Sentinel says no. Trask is like, what the heck? Master Mold says, you're going to replace Senator Kelly's brain with a computer.
Yes, he says, you are going to remove Kelly's brain and replace it with a computer. I love Kelly's response, because he's just like, what? Don't do that.
It's...
My brain?
It's a silly plan. Well, I'll just
silly,
say that.
But it's also, it feels very 90s to me, in like kind of a...
See, I feel like it...
I don't know.
It feels very like Silver Age 60s, like the early Silver Age with like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, like that beginning of the Marvel Universe where, you know, nobody knew we hadn't even been to the moon yet. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's one of those things where it's too explicit. Like if he had said, like, we are going to replace the world leaders with robots or something like that, something a little more like nebulous, but just like, listen, you will take a scalpel to his skull, you will remove his brain,
put a computer in his brain.
Computer, approximately brain size.
I think it feels even sillier because of like the opening, and like the major idea of this episode is just so serious in a lot of ways. Like the country's gonna erupt into a civil war, all these protests and riots, and then you have Master Mo be like, put a computer in his brain, and it's just like, okay, we are in science fiction. It reminds you that you're watching a science fiction comic book be turned into a cartoon on Fox Kids at the time.
It's funny too, because like he explains the whole plan. Like Kelly's gonna be the first. They're kidnapping world leaders from all around the world. They're going to replace them all with computers. But then Master Mold says it will be a vast improvement.
Yeah.
So this is his plan.
Again, sassy robots.
They're sassy. They got sass.
Just
as a little aside, I just want to say I've noticed that I keep mentioning, because I watch this with my son every time. So now a little thing from my son about this scene. He's watching it. He's very engaged. He's very interested in what's happening. But he stops me and he says, "Mom, why are their coats so long?" They're wearing trench coats. I had to stop and explain.
Oh, yeah.
The concept of trench coats
to
my son.
Well, when he's older and he can finally watch The Matrix.
Then he'll know.
Then he'll understand why trench coats are always cool.
So now Kelly is freaking out again, obviously. And I think Trask is also freaking out. But we cut back to the mansion where they're trying to figure out what they're even going to do because they think that they need to rescue Kelly still.
Yeah. Rogue says, where are we going to find them? Sentinels are us, which is, in 2020, a pretty dated reference now.
Pretty darn dated, yeah.
Now,
that's going to be one that, like, the kids watching it are like, what is that? What does that mean? In order to find out who's working with them, Gambit, back in the Genoshan episode, the Slave Island episode, he, met them. And so Xavier's going to go in his mind and find the faces of these people so they can, identify them and find them. And in the process, first Gambit is like, don't go too far into my brain. Because he's very mysterious.
Yeah. I mean, he's got dark secrets.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're revealed. But in the process, we see Belladonna, who shows up next season. And we also see Ghost Rider.
I saw that. Is that like a cool thing? Does he hang out with Ghost Rider?
Him and Ghost Rider have some history in the comics, yeah.
Huh, I am unaware of this.
So I was just so cool. I forgot about that. I was sitting there, I'm like, oh, who's in this memory?
It's funny because Ghost Rider is coming at him like a weird zombie person, and I don't think that's really what Ghost Rider is like, is he? Isn't he just
maybe
some
he's trying
guy
to do his
who
penance
happens to have
stare to Gambit at the time. I don't know. Who knows? We should have got an episode where we saw Gambit and Ghost Rider doing a buddy cop.
If they reboot it, we can insist on a Ghost Rider episode.
Boy, the escape, because this is where Xavier's giving his Civil War speech. Or if we don't save Senator Kelly.
If we don't save Kelly, because then the anti-mutant sentiment will boil over and it'll just be us versus them and everything will be terrible.
Gambit is less enthused about going. He calls it suicide. Suicide to save those who are their enemies and want them dead and everything.
Yeah, he just straight up does not understand this mindset. Like, why would we do that?
That's where Xavier talks about the Civil War, like they're creating a civil war and an anti-mutant fever is going to run through the country. And I didn't really think about it because at first I was like, the X-Men are pretty powerful. I think they could handle this. But then when there's a kind of a bird's eye or a ceiling shot of them at the table, I'm like, you know what? There's only 7 of them.
Yeah.
Even though she can control the weather, her versus everybody isn't, it's not going to end well.
Yeah, so, it's a very palpable feeling throughout this episode of the high stakes of what's happening. Because, you're right. You think of these, super powered people, they can take on anything. Right. But the whole thing just feels very, are we going to do this? Because this is going to be intense.
Yeah, every now and then, it's nice when the show reminds us that they are kind of like this underground force. That they're hidden away in these secret basements of this secret mansion.
Well, it's a really wise thing that they do, and I think kind of an unusual thing because especially now, I don't know if I remember specifically from earlier things, but I guess things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things would do this, where they would lose sight of that. You just get so zoomed in on these characters and their prowess and their rightness. And it reaches a point where you get 5 seasons in and they can do no wrong. And it just kind of loses a lot of its power because it's just this group of great, perfect people who just keep doing great, perfect things. Right. And I think it's really impressive that they caught that this early. It's the end of the first season. So they could be on that trajectory, but they stopped themselves and they're like, let's remember, this is just this group of people who are on an uphill battle.
Right. Well, don't forget, was it Deadly Reunions where Xavier's like, I failed, and Storm is like, no, Professor, we failed together. So, it has that. Cyclops is like, I'll be in the Blackbird. I don't think Jean says anything.
She doesn't. She just goes with him, which is
it's
not
too bad
because
they all get a stand-up and silently walk moment. Rogue is kind of like, are you coming, Gambit? And goes off. Jubilee is going to go. Wolverine stops her. And then she gives this speech about how she's an X-Men. She's one of them. Being an X-Men is the most important thing in her world. And I got a little teary-eyed during that speech this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. Because I thought that the tears were a little overboard for her.
Yeah, but I think it was the speech she kind of gave, and I think it was just kind of the Jubilee is young, but she's win or lose in this moment. The the fate of what happens after this episode is just as much Jubilee's future as it is everybody else's, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I guess I feel like that speech didn't really land for me because it felt a little bit like she was. Yeah, that's true. But I also feel like it's like she's fighting against something that's not really there because she spent the entire first season being very involved in all of the battles.
There's not a lot of
just jumping in. So just this one moment where Wolverine's like, I don't think so, kid. And she's just like, no, I just have to. You guys, I love you so much. It just seems too much. Like if she had spent the entire season working towards being an X-Man, like getting herself taken seriously, then this would be like a climactic moment of that. But as it was, it just sort of felt unnecessary.
Well, the heart behind it got me, I guess.
That's good. And then Wolverine, of course, says that it's the same for him. Yeah. That like I feel the same way.
That's nice to hear.
About you guys. I love you guys so much.
Gambit goes off as well. They all go. They finally
Gambit is convinced.
Yep. They leave, and Magneto has that line where he's like, "You all are fools, heroic fools." And then he also has an aside where he's like, "It's always the brave to die first." But I like it. I think it's one of those reminders where, because we haven't seen him for 9 episodes and he's only been in 2, that the voice actor for Magneto is so good.
Yeah, it's nice to give him a couple little things like that to really solidify him in the episode. You know I don't think that those lines are as successful as his previous ones because he did have like earlier lines that could have read melodramatic, but his delivery really made them work great. I don't know that translated the same in these ones, but it was a good thing to have him have something to say.
I think Magneto and Apocalypse, they both have like this grandiose sort of way of speaking and delivering lines, but Magneto's is more earnest and Apocalypse is just, gonzo.
He just leans into it. Yeah. Apocalypse is just like, I am God. So. Yeah.
And Magneto's a bit more, I don't know, there's a bit more of martyrdom behind his words.
Yeah.
There's I am God. Weep. There are thousands of Sentinels, we're told.
Yeah.
Because
so they're
Master
going
Wolf
straight to the
Sentinels. Awaken the Sentinels.
Yeah, they're going to the core.
Right.
They get there and they split up, which I think is cool. It's Cyclops and Gambit and Wolverine. Is it just those 3 that go down? And Jean. Yeah. Go down into the...
Yeah, they're in like an abandoned mine.
Yeah, so they're there to start the fight.
Yeah.
And then
Rogue, Storm, and Jubilee are on top. Rogue and Storm are doing air support. And so is Professor X, Ace Pilot.
Yeah, he's zooming around in the jet.
Blasting them away. I mean... That's pretty cool. I mean, you one of the things you liked about the road cut of the Days of Future Past film is that they put Xavier in the pilot seat of the Blackbird and gave him kind of gave him like a action scene when they were escaping because he was doing stuff with the thrusters and everything. But like outside of that, Xavier doesn't get a lot of action scenes in other media.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this cartoon has never shied away from putting Xavier in the action. I mean, he was there in the chemical plant with Magneto. And in season 2, he's off having Savage Land adventures with Magneto. So, like, they're not like, oh, he's too powerful to put in the field. They're like, no, we'll do it. He's Xavier.
Get him in there.
Yeah. It's cool because they give him that, I don't know, that like adventurer's clothes he has with like the pouches and everything.
Yeah.
Like he's dressed.
It's like almost military sort of, or like a safari outfit.
Yeah, he's like paramilitary in his uniform. It just kind of like if you see that, you're like, well, Xavier's already, he's out there. Put him out there in the field. I always thought that was so cool, even as like when I was younger, that he always had his like action uniform too.
Yeah, it is cool. Once like they, in the cave, they just sort of like initiate something, and basically from then on all of the fighting is happening up at the top until much later, and it's Rogue and Storm and Jubilee, and they're just doing it, they're just taking over and everything. And Rogue
throws a train at one of them.
Yeah, they are killing it. And Jubilee has this cute moment where she I can't remember exactly how she does, but she takes one down and she's just like, I got one.
Yeah.
She's all excited about it. But yeah, they're just like killing it. Yeah. And I was listening to the very first episode that we did about the first episode of the animated series. I was listening to it this morning. And one of the things that I was so excited about was how they placed Rogue and Storm at the forefront of so much of the fighting, the intensity and everything. And listening to that and comparing it to how I felt watching them in this episode was really funny because, like, I hear myself talking and like genuinely being kind of surprised that they would do that and everything. And by this point, I'm just like, they're the strongest ones.
You've seen it for 13 episodes. You've been convinced that they know what they're doing.
They maintain it. They just carry it right through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rogue was the one who lifted the metal off of Magneto. She's throwing pieces of trains at the Sentinels. At one point, she just flies through one. Storm hits one with lightning and it just explodes.
Yeah,
in
they're
midair.
intense. Yeah, and there's a one moment where Jubilee is taking one down and then one sneaks up behind her and Rogue has to save her. And they have a little bit of like Rogue says something about how she has to be careful and then she gets taken down. There's a lot of really cool moving parts happening in the scene.
Well, we've only ever seen them fighting like a couple of Sentinels. Like in the Night of the Sentinels, when they go to that base, I don't even know how many there were, but it wasn't more than 10. You know what I mean? And
right.
Even on Genosha, there wasn't that many Sentinels, even though they had a Master Mold there. And now it's like thousands of Sentinels, and we've always seen them kind of struggle against, like, they have to give their all against, like, less than 10. And now they're fighting thousands. And there's that shot underground when they activate the Sentinels, and you just see like the hallway of Sentinels lighting up in the distance, and then when they're flying out, it's just like a swarm of them. And like you have to think that, like, as kids watching, this must have been as much as must-see TV as it can get.
Oh yeah, it's a
kids
huge moment.
On March 27th, 1993. Like
1993.
You're watching this and you're just like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's intense. And then as this whole fight is happening and you see Xavier zooming around,
he's about to crash.
Hit.
Yeah.
Yep. And he's going down, who should show up but Magneto! Magneto saves him.
Uh-huh.
And it's just this great entrance because he'd given this whole speech about how this is pointless and we're never going to be with, humans or whatever. And he just shows up out of nowhere and saves his buddy. And side note from my son, he was like, are they friends? Did he just save him because they're friends? I was like, they are friends.
He has another great line too, where he's like, did you think I'd let you die alone, Xavier? I love that.
Because he's still pretending that he doesn't like Xavier, but he does.
Yeah.
They're friends.
Yeah, well, remember when he was during Deadly Reunions, when he was blowing up the chemical plant and he was hoping Xavier would come, and he was like, I wonder what you will look like after all these years. A goatee, perhaps? Like, he has this, like, it'll be nice to see you. I mean, under the circumstances, sure, but it'll still be nice to see you.
Nice to see what you've been doing with your life.
So, I mean, they saved Magneto, and he says we're even. So, it's, at the end of this episode, it's like, we're even now. I'm like, okay, you're buddies.
You guys are besties.
Yeah.
Then we go back underground.
Yeah, and they open the door, and, like, they're in this... They split up. They split up those two groups. Jean and Cyclops go off to find the Senator, and Wolverine and Gambit are off, and Wolverine and Gambit enter a room, and it's all dark, and then the Sentinel eyes just start turning on one by one with that little, like, blip, blip, and I'm like, I tell you what, that shot has always stuck with me as being,
really?
like, such a cool reveal, and it should be something done all the time and everything. just a dark room, and you're like, oh, nothing's here, and then the lights and then, like, the more they're in, you're like, oh, crap.
It's a great shot. And then at that moment, Wolverine's like, oh, crap. And he shoves
Gambit out.
Back out the door, closes the door, and he's like, I'm taking care of this.
Yeah,
Gambit's like, what?
I go where I want to go.
Yeah, it's funny that he thinks, like, Gambit can't handle this, I can.
I know, like, why exactly is he? But yeah, I guess he's being noble or whatever.
Yeah, that was another spot with really cool an animation style, because it's in the dark now because they've closed the door, and so the Sentinels blast, and that creates light, and you see Wolverine, like, jumping around, and then it goes dark again. Every time the Sentinels blast, there's light, and every time it's done, it's dark, and it's just this really cool, like, strobe kind of effect.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like, is a really stylish decision to do. Like, they could just have him in the room. It's probably easier to animate to just have him in the room, but they went for that thing. That's really cool. There's always been this, like, really cool Wolverine versus Sentinel moment.
Yeah, I'd love to know, like, where exactly those decisions come from. Like, is the animator just playing with the moment, or is that something coming from the writers or the producers who are saying, like, I want this to be striking this
like,
way?
It's written by Mark Edens, but it's directed by somebody else. So does the director then storyboard it? Well, we should try to ask that someday.
Yeah, someday.
Cyclops and Jean find Senator Kelly with Trask, and they're Trask is like, how could you do this? Everything's terrible. I made you to help humans. You're supposed to protect humans from mutants. And the Sentinels find, like, in Days of Future Past, the Sentinels are used to create a new world order, it was told, which we were kind of disappointed by, because it's always nice when the Sentinels are like, they take their original programming too far.
Right.
Is something we like to see, which the Days of Future Past movie did. But then Master Mold tells Trask in this episode, that doesn't make any sense. Mutants are humans, thus humans must be protected from themselves.
Yeah.
And like that is just like, aha!
So
gotcha!
Good. So good. And it's like, I love how that lands for him, because it's both this, like, I screwed this up programming wise, because, like, it's my fault that they're going after regular humans now. But it also does, I feel like it also hits on that other level of, like, yeah, they are human. Like, it sort of reminds him a little bit of that truth.
Yeah, he's not redeemed or, like, saved by, he doesn't see the light, because he says, like, I created Sentinels to protect humans from mutants, and now I've created something even worse and more inhuman. And so, like, mutants are still the problem, but he realizes he's a problem too now.
Right.
They get Kelly out of there. Trask blows up a propane tank there, and you think maybe he destroys Master Mold, and they're running. And there's that always kind of cool, intense action moment that seems like really overly synthesized, where it's like, dun, 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 dun. Cyclops is going to go back for Wolverine and Gambit, because he's not leaving anyone behind again.
Not this time.
Remember Morph?
Remember Morph? It's not happening again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he goes back.
I wanted to just say... Cyclops has some kind of sensors in his visor?
Oh, I don't know.
It shows his visor being, like, targeted and all this stuff. I'm like, really?
Oh, well, I mean, that would make sense to add that in. I just wanted to say, before we move too far from that scene, at the very end, before he blows up, Master Mold says, I do not have to destroy because I do not fear.
Yeah. Boom.
They just cram the philosophy into these episodes. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I think they like those type of... I mean, you have to... The villains, like Magneto and Apocalypse and now Master Mold, are always, like, so dramatically written, but it's always, like, so cool.
And
like you said, it has, like, the pathos to tell you about this character. Because, he shoots Cyclops and doesn't kill him. And it's one of those things, like, as an adult, you may be like, well, why didn't that kill him? But he's just like, because I don't fear.
Yeah, I got nothing to fear here. Yeah. Like, oops, I missed. Who cares?
Yeah. Gambit blows up the door, and you know what? I didn't say anything, but it's kind of funny how they sneak into the coal mine at first, because they just send down the one card on the elevator.
Oh, yeah, right.
And the Sentinels are like, what is that? And one's like, I believe it is the Ace of Spades. Yes, and then it blows up in his face. It's just like the Sentinel having to crouch down on his hands, you know?
Like, what is that? Let me get a closer look.
He blows up the door, and Wolverine's there when Cyclops is about to save them. It's Wolverine shirtless on top of a bunch of Sentinels, and Gambit is like, next time I try to save your life, have the sense to be saved or something.
Yeah.
But the Cyclops busts in, and his line is so funny.
Wolverine, you coming? Or is this your day off?
It's just like, got him! Yeah, you just want to high five Cyclops at that one moment. Oh, it's so good.
So funny. And then I love how Cyclops is basically like burrowing out of like he's just like making new tunnels up to the surface.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we know that Rogue is freaking out because a little someone is still missing.
When everything's blowing up, they're up top and they see the explosion and everything, and the Sentinels are flying back underground, and Magneto's like, they're retreating. Rogue first, is it Storm who's like, where are the others? And Rogue's like, where's Gambit?
Damn it!
But they're okay. They pop up, and Gambit does his little flirty routine where he's like, oh, I think maybe somebody missed me, no? And Rogue kisses him by putting her hand on his mouth and kissing the back of her hand, which is a pretty sweet moment, I think.
I think it's so cute.
And then she's like, I hate you.
And then hugs him again.
Yeah, which is how love is, isn't it?
It's just precisely like that.
Love and hate are so close.
just entwined.
Yeah, but then Gambit's like, I don't understand this woman.
but the tone too.
Yeah,
is
he
like,
does.
This is our thing. Yeah. This is how we act.
And considering we just recently talked about Rogue, we know Hilary is a huge Gambit Rogue thing.
I'm a
Would you
shipper.
say that's your strongest ship, or would you say that's Mulder and Scully?
Oh, Mulder and Scully blows it out of the water.
Whoa!
Yeah,
that is news Scully. For me, and not what I was hoping you would say on this podcast.
Really, I will say, just as a side note, that the more recent episodes that they that they released, the new seasons of X-Files, have derailed that a little bit. But my core shipping remains.
All right. Well, then is Gambit Rogue second?
Yeah, I guess.
All right. You know what? Let's stop it there before we were fine. Anyways, Hillary's a huge fan of Rogue and Gambit.
I am. No, I legitimately am. I love them.
So, but yeah, I always thought the kiss through the hand is like a sweet moment where it's also like she can't do it, but she just has to kiss him because she's so happy to see him.
So sweet.
But Master Meld shows up in a giant volcanic explosion through the mountain.
Out of the top of a mountain.
And the moon is silhouetted behind him. And he's just like, I cannot be destroyed.
I am Master Mold.
And Xavier comes in with a sweet line. He's like, you must be destroyed. You represent all that is wrong with humanity. And then it's cool because he doesn't say anything. But as the Blackbird's being shot at, Magneto just flies in to create a shield. And it's Magneto and Xavier being best buds again.
Yep, they're just besties, and they've filled the X-Jet with
TNT and gasoline.
Yeah, which I'm not sure that would be sufficient given how much he's sustained so far.
It's a lot of TNT,
presumably going to take him down.
Who knows what the X-Jet is running on?
That's true. Maybe it's plutonium.
Yeah. But yeah, I've always the shot is just so cool because he's not there, and then Magneto just shows up.
Yeah, it's great.
Just this wordless, speechless coming together. It's the two of them are so good together.
They're great.
Anyways, you're right because the explosion is massive.
Yeah.
It destroys Master Mold. It's another eruption kind of thing. It almost feels like a mushroom cloud in a lot of ways. But then I shouldn't laugh, but there's Xavier just floating on down in his little parachute.
Yep.
His best friend can fly, but there he is in this happy little parachute. Yeah, he's like, Magneto was here. Where'd he go? That's where Magneto's like, we're even. I only did this to be even. I don't even like you very much.
Whatever. Get out of my face.
And they fly off, and then do we hear it's Senator Kelly? We go back to him and he's talking about how
there's a voiceover that transitions into him giving a press conference.
Yeah, he's decided that he's been too harsh, that while they need to come up with a deterrent to stop mutants who will abuse their powers and become criminals and whatnot, they must not. What's the word he uses?
Oppress. I think he says
they must not
oppress.
Be
careful not to oppress
those who would use their powers to benefit mankind.
Yeah.
So Senator Kelly has seen the light.
Yeah, it seems like he's legit, really seen the light.
He's helped free Beast.
Yeah, we get back to Beast, who has been in prison for the entire season. Another really hardcore commitment to a plot point, which I really appreciate.
He has been in prison this entire season.
The whole season. Yeah. He gets jailed in the very beginning, and we check in with him here and there throughout the season with just quick little yep, I'm still here. I could escape, but I'm not going to. Yeah. We're going to let the process run out.
He's been in the opening credits every episode, but unless they visit jail, we haven't really seen him. So it would be nice next season to see Beast in action and doing things.
This is the kind of thing that I complain about all the time with my husband about shows that we really like nowadays, because there's something about the format of streaming or binging or something that I feel like makes it harder for showrunners to commit to plot points like this. So things will happen that seem like if this stuck and this character was like out of here for a while or like something like that, if we just stuck with this for like a season or several episodes, this would be really impactful and like mean something for this show, but they just chicken out. They have it happen and then they're like, oh, he's okay now in the next episode. And I feel like that's something I complain about constantly about TV now. And this season of X-Men has just been so gratifying for things like that, for like planting Magneto and then having him gone, gone. And then so he can emerge because they were patient and had a plan and they stuck with it. And the same thing with Beast, how they had him just sitting there the whole time.
Yeah.
I so appreciate showrunners and producers and anybody involved who will really commit to those kinds of plot choices because it just pays off so well when you really commit to it.
Yeah. I'm glad they get more seasons because it's nice that we get to see Beast again. But if this had been the only thing, it still would have been like, we still would have understood Beast in a lot of ways. Even though he's been in prison, we still would have understood like his character because he's been jovial every time we've seen him. He's had good humor every time he's been. I mean, he's just reading and then he's happy to be out. Now he's get to be out, but he's known what he's doing, is sending a message and all that. It's good stuff.
The immortal bard, so wise about the struggle of the oppressed. Yet today, by the good graces of a prominent senator, I find myself no longer numbered among them.
Beast! You're free!
Cut to Cyclops and Jean on a cliff, and Cyclops proposes to Jean. I guess they are not engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he proposes. Here's a thing that I don't think works really. It's where he's like, let's get married. And Jean says, if we have kids, they'll be mutants and they'll face all the same problems and oppression that we have faced. Yeah. And Cyclops says, I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm like, I see what you're trying to do, but saying like, I want my kids to be oppressed the same as I have been. It just doesn't, it's not the same message of being like, if they're mutants, you know?
Yeah. It's like clunky writing, I think. Because I'm sure what he is supposed to be saying is, I wouldn't have it any other way that they be mutants.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you're saying. He's by saying that, he's saying, I'd love for them to be oppressed. It'd be super.
It's a little sloppy. It's like the message was there, you just didn't know how to really land it, I guess.
Yeah, but like that whole scene for me was clunky. I like what they're doing with the finale. How it's like we've wrapped the main story, and now we're having little.
I guess I hadn't really thought of like Cyclops and Jean as the crux of season 1. So to end it on them, it feels like there's other characters I would have liked to see post Sentinel Island fight.
It feels like they present it like we've been waiting for this to happen. It's just like, anyone, okay, well, that's nice.
It should be Jubilee, I feel like.
You're right. Yeah, that would.
Who gets like a last moment where maybe she's like watching a speech or her and Wolverine are having a conversation. It's, I don't know.
You're right. That would have been good.
They didn't know they were getting a season 2. They only knew they were getting a season 3. So season 2 wasn't for.
That sounds like you're saying like they would have skipped over season 2. Like, okay, we got season 3 locked in.
Yeah, it's how season 2 though. It's how you stop the sophomore slump in your creative process. You just don't do it. Yeah, but yeah, they focus on them. But they were also saying that maybe if they got a second season, they're trying to set up this kind of cliffhanger because Cyclops and Jean are on this beach or cliff or whatnot having this conversation. Camera pulls back. It's a monitor. Somebody's watching them. Who is it? It's Mr. Sinister.
No,
not his. Not his voice actor. That will be his voice actor come season 2.
Yeah, which is good because this voice is a little too late.
Sinister knows what we're having.
He has a very solid henchman vibe.
Yes, it's a henchman's voice. It's the kind of voice that feels like the kind of X-Men cartoon we could have got.
Yeah,
and it maybe the kind of voice acting they were trying to avoid, but everything I've always kind of read or seen about this makes it kind of sound like it was a bit rushed to do that. So I don't think they were really focusing because this Mr. Sinister voice is great. when he finally shows up. But
I mean, now that I'm remembering that's how it ends, I'm sure that's why they landed it with Jean and Cyclops, because they wanted
this kind of cliffhanger.
Hypothetically, if they were going to move forward,
right,
then they'd want Sinister, and then that's kind of like the focus where that would be. Right. So I guess more than an ending of the first season, it's a springboard for the next.
But I would have liked to have seen like a bit more of a core message.
Yeah, I think so. Especially
will they get married?
Yeah, it's basically just those two things. Like you see Beast, which is a definite like end of the season. Kelly. Yeah, you get Kelly, but that feels more like it's just finishing the episode.
Right.
But then like as like an epilogue, you have Beast, and then you have Jean and Cyclops. Yeah. It feels like there should have been like 3 or 4 maybe little like postscripts.
Even though we get a bunch more episodes after this, there's still that desire to see like all the different plot threads revisited right before the end.
Yeah, it's true. As well as they do the wrapping up of everything. There's always something left off.
Okay, well that was did you like this episode as like a standalone episode and as a season 1 finish?
Yes, both. I thought it worked really well. I mean, calling it a standalone, I mean, obviously it's like springing out of the previous episodes, but like I think it works just as an episode. Yeah. I think it's great as a finale, aside from what we talked about at the very end. But yeah, I think it kind of delivers everything you'd want.
The first time I saw this episode, I thought it was like, this is like it's their big like it feels like it is their biggest like action episode they've had. I mean, they've had plenty of like action. I mean, they fought Apocalypse and whatnot, but the stakes are just so high in this. It's not just like you need to stop Apocalypse from giving more speeches. It's the skies are filled with Sentinels just
who are like
around.
Stealing the brains of everybody on the planet.
Yeah, but like this also feels like there's episodes where like certain characters aren't there. I mean, it's all of them there fighting all these Sentinels. It feels like they knew that they had to end this season with like this epic battle with the Sentinels, which have really been the real enemy of season 1. Like every episode that's happened has kind of sprung off the Night of the Sentinels and the concept of the Sentinels. So having them fight that and Master Mold, it all just like concludes everything. It's just, but like also all those like little action scenes with like Wolverine hopping around in the dark or like what is that? It's the Ace of Spades. All these little character moments, but also like the first half with all like getting them there, having these speeches and talking about what they stand for and everything, and it's so impressive that they could just nail this ending like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of complexity for the episode. It's not just finishing up arcs. It's not just like, let's wrap this up. There are those moments. Right. There are different scenes. The characters are all in different places. It's very layered. Yeah. They put a lot into it.
And don't forget, like, the idea of a serialized cartoon was something they went up against.
Yeah.
When Margaret Loesch, she had wanted to do something more dramatic and more serialized, and they were like, that's crazy. No one's going to do that. No one's going to want to watch that. And they had to like fight for that. And I think it's, you notice it more in this because like there's so many cartoons that when it's the last episode of the season, it's just an episode. And sometimes it's not even a very good episode. It's just the last episode in production order. Yeah. So like, getting a 13 episode season with this kind of ending, with this kind, in 1993, an animated series, it's I don't know, it's impressive that they were able to do that to have a final episode that's better than a lot of like live action adult final episodes. Of season 1.
And I feel like this episode really brings home the kinds of things that we've been saying about a lot of the episodes and the season as a whole, that, like you said, how it was like pushing up against serialization, but it's like the most serialized one season arc that I've ever seen.
Like,
every single episode leads directly into the next one. Even the ones like the Juggernaut one that are standalone
came
episodes.
right after the Slave Island because the mansion was destroyed.
They have to be like directly out of the previous one, and they lead into the next one.
Yeah, your heart goes out to the kids who are watching this like every other episode.
I know. Oh my word.
Who maybe didn't know the schedule or was just getting there late and like, what happened last episode? And like maybe they're missing the previously.
Like, oh no,
I don't. Yeah.
Wait, he's dead.
Oh man.
But then we've got the arc and we've got the fluidity, but then we also have the complexity and the almost adult nature of like the dialogue and the way that they present plot points. We have a little bit of that in the end of this episode, and we have a lot in previous episodes where, I mean, I know it feels like it goes against show don't tell, but there are these things that happen that you only know happened because of how the characters react to them after the fact. And I feel like the way they do that is more of a sort of a delicate storytelling, like an intricate way of doing it, a lot more than you would see in just a cartoon, you know? Like it's just like they knew that they were going to be presenting this to adults. And I also feel like it means that they took more pride in what they were doing. Because I think a lot of the time when you have a cartoon, I mean, I'm sure cartoonists, everyone who works on anything they work on has pride in what they do to at least some extent, and like they try to do their best.
This show's coming after like, you know, the 80s, which a lot of people remember so nostalgically, but I mean, you watch G.I. Joe and Transformers and, you know, He-Man and stuff. It's like, yeah, people have all this love for those shows, but like compared to something like this, or even like, you know, the Batman animated series or the other shows that were starting to crop up in the 90s and onwards, they're so shallow, you know. It doesn't matter what happens every episode. It doesn't matter how the characters are feeling at the beginning of the episode, because it
doesn't really matter what they learn. Like however didactic an episode is, they've learned something, but it doesn't impact their character moving forward.
So yeah, I mean, they must have had pride doing that and being like, we're gonna make a show that's about something that has stakes, that has a message and stuff, and we're gonna, you know.
They had to be super purposeful about it, which is like what we talked about at the very, very beginning with Margaret Loesch, that she just invested so much in getting this done the way she wanted it done.
Yeah.
And it feels like that's just a lot of people getting together and making something like this.
Because she had so much confidence in the idea that kids and adults were going to watch a show that starred adults, that was more drama than, you know, just like goofy space action, and was going to be serialized, and like she staked her job on it, and like she was just like so right that like people wanted stuff like that, and it would work, and like, you know, it really becomes like a standard for a lot of shows moving on.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and I mean, it's now X-Men the animated series is like this pillar for an entire generation.
It's still crazy though,
like tweeting about it and writing memes about it, and everybody just has these connections to this show, and it's because they put so much into it.
It's crazy though that like people still have to like fight up against some of that, because like I think even by the last season of Justice League Unlimited, which was like in the mid 2000s, they're like, you need to stop making these serialized. And it's just like, but here you are. I don't know how people like that stuff with that.
I know. I think that TV producers or whoever is in charge of those kinds of decisions just have this thing in their head, and I'm sure that to an extent they're right, because it keeps happening. They keep insisting on this, but they seem to think that every single show that exists needs to be like Law and Order, where you can just drop in and you've never seen anything before, and then you just watch this episode, and then I guess you're going to get hooked. Okay. Well, I'm just going to say this season I've watched entirely with my 5 now 6-year-old son, and I have
watching.
yeah,
He's
and
not
I
the
have
same.
Loved it. He's not the same anymore. He's changed. I've loved rewatching it and have legitimately found new and interesting things about it, watching it as an adult than I did when I was a kid. And he has just loved it. Like it's just grabbed him. He's making suggestions about like what characters should be doing which mission. I mean, he's really engaged with it. And this is a kid who is like new millennial or whatever the generation is going to be, he is completely divorced from the experience of a 90s child, and he just loves this show.
Has hearing him like respond positively to Cyclops, has it helped you understand your husband, who is a big Cyclops fan?
Oh my word. Well, I mean, that's kind of a tricky question, because initially it was funny to me that he liked Cyclops. But even from the first episode, I've had a very different experience with Cyclops
that whole
this time
your
around.
Day off line, like it's so good.
Yeah, like I remember him just being this dweeb, like this Boy Scout dweeb, and this time around, I really appreciated him. I thought he was funny. I thought he was strong and like a good leader, and I thought he was good.
Yeah. Then season 1 as a whole has also been, besides this episode, you've already said you've just been a big fan of it.
Oh yeah.
Watching it is still like, yeah, man, if I need to remember like the core of what the X-Men are about, like a lot of the episodes coming after this will be a little bit more character specific and deal with a lot more of their backstories in like the lore of the universe and everything. This season, this 13 episodes has been so focused on like the message that it really is like a definitive way to show somebody the X-Men, like the core. I feel I've always said like X-Men 2 is like, oh, you want to know what the X-Men are? Watch X-Men 2. But like if they've got the time and are willing, just show them. These 13 episodes are just so focused on it that it really is just like this definitive take on the X-Men's core thoughts and values and like mission statement. And you know what? I, as like a comic book fan, and as an X-Men comic book fan especially, what's really cool about this first season, it mixes in all these different eras of X-Men characters and stories. It just makes it feel like one cohesive whole that you can't really get with the comics. Because like if you read the first Stan Lee issues and then you skip to Claremont and then you skip to Morrison and then you skip ahead to... None of it feels the same in terms of his writing and stuff. But in this, they've able to do like Silver Age stuff like Master Mold and the Juggernaut with later stuff like Apocalypse and Genosha, and then like the 90s stuff with Bishop and Cable and stuff, and it all just feels like it all was meant to work together from the beginning.
Oh yeah, really
which
does.
I think is really impressive that they can do Slave Island and Cable's there, and it feels like it fits. Or they can do Deadly Reunions and have a Magneto Sabretooth comparison, and it feels... It's really like the idea of creating a cohesive whole with like X-Men comic book is just like it's a monumental task, because it's almost 80 years now. So the fact that they were able to do it in 13 episodes and make it so that even now it's only as pop culture references that feel dated, I think. Like the characters and stuff don't feel too dated. Like because they don't know too much about Gambit, they're just able to focus on what was cool about Gambit when you're reading the comic books at the time. And same with like Cable or Rogue and all this stuff. So like there's almost like all these characters are at their core, and they just, I don't know, it's just it makes all other animated X-Men cartoons have to do something differently than just a straight retelling. Because
you're right.
This show's already done it. You have to think of something with a twist now after this. But the first season is just like, it's so solid and it's just so definitive. I love it.
Yeah. I love that point. I love your point about how cohesive they make everything and how they just have a point of view for this, and they can make everything.
It's
no
the
matter how
serialized nature too, because
fit right in there.
Yeah, because every episode flows into the next episode. You don't have too many moments to be like, well, those two characters are so different from each other. It's like, well, no, you just... Because Cable was in Slave Island, then we're ready to see him in the Cure episode. You know, they just are able to flow characters from episode to episode because of the serialized nature.
Right.
It just feels very natural.
It's kind of a shame. Like, I'm going to say something that listeners might take issue with, but it's a shame that something like this carries so many stigmas, because it's got the geek thing, because it's comic booky and superhero-y, and it's a cartoon. It's got a lot of strikes against it for people taking it seriously, because watching it as an adult and like a critical thinker, I think it's a really impressive piece of work. And I think that they've done such purposeful and interesting things. And I think if people could really examine it and just take it seriously, they'd get a lot out of it.
Well, I guess that's the thing, right? Because like adults watching this, then the show's probably preaching to the choir because they're already like semi-interested in the X-Men. But then it's the kids that you're grabbing new, the ones who don't have like preconceived notions of animated or cartoon or something, and so then you're giving these big ideas that we wish more adults thought about, but you're giving them to the kids who will then grow up and hopefully remember those thoughts and ideas. Joe Academia, who thinks cartoons might be a lower medium, he's not going to watch it no matter how good you tell him it is, but a kid will watch anything you put in front of them. So just make sure you're putting X-Men in front of them, and maybe they'll grow up to be pretty good people. Any favorite episodes? I know asking you to remember certain things
as soon as you
rough.
said it.
Here, I'll go through them.
Yeah. Okay,
how do you feel about Night of the Sentinels now? Because you said you've seen Night of the Sentinels probably more than you've seen certain members of your family.
That's true. Yeah, that is definitely true. I mean, again, I haven't seen it since I've been
you had this on tape, Night of the Sentinels.
Adult. Yeah, I had it on tape. From Pizza Hut, I think. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But so I've seen that a million times. But watching it for this rewatch for the podcast, it stands up. I mean, it's just as good as it would have been initially. It doesn't feel like I'm getting different things out of it watching it now, so it doesn't feel super repetitive like it used to because I watched it a million times. Right. It's kind of hard to talk about individual episodes of this
because
season.
It is so serialized.
Because it's so serialized. Yeah. I mean, it just feels like one story going throughout.
I tend to, I really like Deadly Reunions, though, with Magneto and the Chemical Plant and Wolverine and Sabretooth and Xavier having that discussion, that whole, how come we have to be nice to you're wrong about this, Xavier. There's just a lot of, strong character work in there with the core X-Men thing. I've always thought Slave Island and The Cure were really strong episodes.
That's funny because I think I would have put Slave Island at the bottom. I mean, it's fine.
It's a Gambit episode.
I don't know. I just don't get as much out of it as I do out of the other episodes. That one and the Juggernaut one, I probably would put
Juggernaut's probably the weakest of them. I'd also probably put Captive Hearts pretty low because
which one's that one?
The Morlock episode.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Because I'm just not but see that's the other thing. The Morlocks are also in this season.
Seriously.
Yeah. And then
probably, I mean, it seems like, I mean, Slave Island is part of the overall story, but it's a little standalone-y. So I guess I'm thinking the more standalone ones are the ones that I'm less impressed by. Okay.
Unstoppable Juggernaut isn't necessarily a bad episode. It's just very middle of the road.
Yeah.
It's kind of it feels kind of like maybe what the X-Men cartoon could have ended up being on a regular basis.
Well, if they stuck with episodic, it would have just been that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
it's him, and then it's Pyro, and then it's whatever.
Oh boy, yeah. Here's our Pyro episode, everybody.
Which is a little bit how Evolution was. Yeah.
But I think they had the long game in mind because they introduced every Brotherhood member.
And what you're saying, I don't think any of them is a bad episode. Yeah. I think they're all good.
Yeah.
But just some of them are really good.
Yeah. Do you know, the tapes I have here, it's an episode a tape.
Yeah. Back in the old days.
Yeah. Screw you, Fox. What junk?
Well, at that time, this was before I was old enough to think about buying those kinds of things. Sure. So anything like that is taped off TV for me. Either I'm watching it live or I'm watching a tape with all old Campbell's commercials and buy-in minutes.
Yeah. Your creepy crawlers.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then that was season 1 of the X-Men animated series 90s.
We got through it.
How
many more is it?
How many more episodes?
No, how many more seasons?
The DVDs are split into 5. When we come back to the anime series, we'll be starting with season 2, which is a 2-parter. So there you go. It's another 2-parter.
Yeah.
And guess what?
What?
Mr. Sinister's in it.
Can I just sit out this season?
No, Hilary. You're going to love season 2, and you're going to love Mr. Sinister. He's got the little
weird pill. Oh, I just can't.
The weird pill?
I don't want to talk about it.
He has a pill? I don't...
That he takes from Cyclops.
He takes a pill from Cyclops?
It's shaped like a pill, but it's not a pill.
Oh, right. Yes. Also, there's something really like, I don't know, his design, because he's got like the black lipstick too.
Yeah, he's so gross.
It always I guess
you
it
all
always
can look
feels
forward
like,
to me doing this voice.
I guess it always feels like there's some kind of like black bile coming out of his mouth. You know
Ew,
what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. Like
he
dripping
seems like
or
he's
something.
very like salivary.
Oh, he's so gross.
All right, so our
He's
next
turned me against all geneticists.
yes, yeah. All right, well, our next episode of this podcast is probably is a spotlight of some kind, undetermined, TBT.
I randomly this time, like as I was walking back here, I was like, we should do a Storm episode.
A Storm episode? I do love Storm. She's got weird complications thrown in her life too. They're just like, oh, really?
Yeah, maybe we could do a Storm episode.
Yeah, Storm's fun. Wait, was it because you were watching this show and Storm's always good in the show?
Wind!
Yeah, it's fun. It's nice because Kendra made fun of it, but the show didn't do that in this episode where he's like, remember, stop him gently. She's like, as gently as the falling snow. But then she doesn't go up and go like, snow! Which would...
Well, it's funny too, because like, she really does do gently falling snow, but then he like violently crashes into a tree.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like driving at 70 miles an hour on a bunch of slippery snow is a gentle way to stop somebody. And why have Storm? Storm's not the person who could gently stop somebody. She literally controls forces of nature. Yeah. No one has ever been gently stopped by a force of nature.
Why don't you go gently tug on the...
Yeah, Rogue is she can fly under the car and pick it up or something. Yeah, Storm. Anyway. All right, remember, the lightning bolt must be gentle.
Gentle lightning bolts.
As gentle as 1,000 bolts of lightning.
And a hurricane, no storm. Please.
A tornado shall pick him up. 2 tornadoes.
You're missing the point, Storm.
Yeah. I'm Dust vs. Tweak everywhere online. Apart from other shows on the Radio Meanwhile Network, I'm the co-host of the podcast, The All the Book Show, where we've been talking about a lot of quarantine media to consume while you're locked down, books, movies, shows, that sort of thing. Thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Again, you can find more about this show and others like it at our network's website, radiomeanwhile.com. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Previously on X. Please rate, subscribe, and share the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
Bye.